On March 1st, 2023, in multiple major cities across the United States, a coordinated incident began to unfold within the digital infrastructure of several leading retail platforms. These companies had recently deployed a series of new application programming interfaces, APIs, designed to streamline online transactions and enhance customer engagement. The main actors in this story were four prominent retailers, each with millions of active users and a considerable online presence. Among them were TechMart, Shopwave, Retail Giant, and Homestyle Markets, all vying for market supremacy in an increasingly competitive e-commerce landscape. The integration of these APIs, while intended to boost efficiency and improve user experience, was executed without adequate attention to security measures. A critical failure occurred in the API architecture, specifically in the setup of access permissions, which was insufficiently configured. This oversight allowed unauthorized users to gain access to the transaction processing systems. By default, the APIs granted broader access to internal directories than intended, due to a misconfigured access control policy that overlooked essential security protocols. This exposed a vector for exploitation, as malicious actors could easily retrieve sensitive data and hijack transaction processes. As these vulnerabilities became apparent, the initial measurable impact was significant. Within the first 2 weeks of the API deployment, reports indicated that fraudulent transactions began surfacing at an alarming rate. An estimated $2 million worth of unauthorized transactions were processed across the platforms. User accounts were compromised, resulting in the loss of over 100,000 user credentials. The retail companies faced service disruptions as customers encountered issues with purchases, leading to complaints flooding customer service channels. This initial fraud number quickly escalated to a staggering $10 million by the end of the first month, resulting in lost revenue and eroded trust among the user base. Internally, the atmosphere within the organizations was one of confusion and concern. In the days following the incident, numerous emails were exchanged among technical teams attempting to identify the root cause of the discrepancies reflected in their financial and user reports. The incident response teams convened in multiple virtual meetings, discussing the unexpected spikes in transaction volumes flagged by their monitoring tools. However, initial investigations led to incorrect assumptions. Some team members speculated that it was a benign spike in traffic resulting from promotional campaigns rather than a serious security breach. Partial fixes were implemented to revert the API changes, but without a comprehensive understanding of the underlying issues, these measures only provided a temporary solution. Externally, early signals began to emerge as well. Users reported difficulties with their accounts on social media, expressing frustrations over unauthorized transactions. Customer forums buzzed with discussions about potential security breaches, eliciting reaction from concerned consumers. Although traditional media coverage was limited at this stage, a few minor tech news outlets picked up the stories of unusual transaction activities. As these external signals began to gain traction, the organizations remained focused on internal communication, prioritizing the development of a damage control strategy over widespread acknowledgement of the issue. Despite the attempts to resolve the situation, the lack of oversight and failure to collaborate across the companies meant that opportunity for resolution diminished. As the fraudulent activities continued unabated, further investigation revealed the extent of the damage. Teams worked around the clock to find a lasting fix in the face of mounting pressure. However, The initial panic soon transitioned into a scramble for more profound answers. The flaws in the API had exposed not just individual vulnerabilities, but also a systemic failure within the company's approach to digital infrastructure security. While incident timelines initially indicated limited disruption, the ramifications expanded as customers continued to face issues in accessing their accounts. Confusion was rampant in incident communication channels, where team members struggled to decode rapid changes in transaction logs. More sophisticated and skilled attackers began to leverage the same vulnerabilities, leading to exponential growth in fraudulent behaviors. As the nature of the fraud evolved, a united effort across the platforms appeared necessary. In secret, internal communication channels reflected the rising worry as the companies contemplated external involvement. Security audits and third-party assessments had become urgent necessities. External consultants, previously relied upon more for performance enhancements, were now seen as critical for crisis mitigation. The interrelations among the implicated companies complicated the process, as existing competitive tensions created hesitations in data sharing. As more detailed forensic investigations commenced, leading security analysts identified, for the first time, the possibility of a collective breach across these retail giants. Each company's internal logs, when stacked together, illuminated a broader pattern of exploitations that had evaded detection for months. Not only did this reveal a complex web of vulnerabilities, but it also highlighted shared weaknesses attributed to the rushed deployment without rigorous security oversight. The situation reached an inflection point when the internal communications finally sparked a recognition that the initial incident was just the tip of the iceberg. Concerns over sustained fraud intensified as internal teams realized the magnitude of the problem, leading to discussions about full-scale reviews of their application security protocols. With users increasingly vocal about the security lapses, the companies faced rising public scrutiny. Depending on the outcome of future actions, reputational risks loomed large, threatening to permeate their brand values. As the incident unfolded, external reports began surfacing, capturing the attention of cybersecurity analysts and regulatory bodies. Media attention shifted focus as the story gained traction, revealing a pressing need for oversight in the digital marketplace. Retail platforms braced for the kind of systemic changes that would follow such revelations. Facing a rising tide of complaints and the implications of potential legal action, the leading actors prepared to confront the reality they had been hesitant to acknowledge. Unbeknownst to them, the landscape of digital commerce was on the brink of a significant transformation, one that would challenge existing practices and redefine regulatory standards across the board. With ongoing deliberations about necessary reforms dominating the conversation, the digital marketplace awaited the next decisive actions that would emerge from this crisis point. On January 15, 2024, amidst heightened scrutiny and pressure from various stakeholders, the retail platforms involved initiated a joint press conference. Here, they disclosed the comprehensive extent of the digital fraud impacting millions of customers. The leadership from each company presented a united front, acknowledging the misconfiguration of APIs as the primary cause. They outlined a multi-step plan for resolution, including enhanced security audits, immediate infrastructure upgrades, and revised access controls. In the following weeks, in the wake of growing public outrage, the platforms began to execute their action plans. Critical updates were pushed through security patches, although concerns regarding potential downtime led to delays. Customer notification processes were implemented, including warnings to affected users encouraging password resets and vigilance regarding account activities. Despite these efforts, the exposure of sensitive customer data continued to fuel fears of identity theft, leading to an increase in customer service inquiries and complaints. By the end of January, data from independent cybersecurity firms revealed that the breadth of the financial losses had escalated beyond initial estimates. Reports suggested that upwards of $300 million had been siphoned off through fraudulent transactions across the platforms. In turn, this drew the attention of the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, which subsequently announced its intent to investigate the matter further, citing concerns over consumer safety and the adequacy of the platform's security measures. As the investigation progressed, several customers publicly shared their experiences, detailing fraudulent charges and unauthorized access to their accounts. These accounts were disseminated on social media and amplified by technology journalists, exposing the systemic weaknesses in digital security practices. As additional evidence emerged from internal audits, it became clear that a group of inside employees had also overlooked critical alerts due to a lack of proper training and security culture within their respective organizations. By February 2024, lawsuits began flooding into the courts, with consumers seeking compensation for financial losses. Class action suits were filed against all implicated retail platforms, effectively turning the situation into a multi-layered legal battle. These lawsuits prompted the companies to mobilize legal teams and prepare for harsh scrutiny in court. Governments across various jurisdictions responded to rising consumer dissatisfaction with a promise of regulatory action. Legislative bodies began to draft new consumer protection laws aimed at tightening data security standards, particularly for digital transactions. The fallout from the scandal prompted discussions around the introduction of mandatory audits for API security as a precondition for operation in retail. On March 10, 2024, the FTC announced findings from its ongoing investigation, detailing not only the incidents, but also the preventive measures that had been lacking across the platforms. It made recommendations for more stringent regulatory oversight of e-commerce practices, which would set the stage for a new era of digital commerce regulation. These recommendations were met with some resistance by the retail platforms, which argued that overly strict regulations could stifle innovation. As months passed, the incident's severe implications continued to unfold. Several executives faced pressure to resign from their positions amid calls for accountability and heads to roll. By June 2024, several high-ranking individuals, including the chief technology officers of the implicated companies, submitted their resignations in an effort to appease investors and restore some level of consumer confidence. Meanwhile, financial repercussions were felt profoundly, with stock prices of the affected companies taking significant hits. Analysts estimated compounded losses near $500 million as businesses scrambled to contain the fallout. Some smaller companies faced operational instability, leading to service shutdowns and layoffs. Eventually, by the end of the summer of 2024, the affected retail platforms reached a settlement agreement with the class action lawsuit groups. The settlement included provisions for reimbursement to affected customers, significant funds earmarked for security infrastructure upgrades, and the commitment to annual security assessments by independent third-party firms for the next 5 years. In December 2024, the regulatory landscape began to shift substantially, with new legislation aimed at digital security finally being signed into law. This legislation mandated stricter controls on API security, ensuring that future compliance would be critical for companies operating in the digital retail space. By the close of the year, major retail platforms successfully recuperated from some of the losses, bolstering their defenses but grappling with persistent reputational damage. The collective impact of systemic reforms in digital commerce had begun, but the industry had been irrevocably altered. Assessments pointed towards a challenging transformation, highlighting the need for continuous vigilance in safeguarding user data. Final update. As of December 31, 2024, the retail platforms involved have settled legal disputes, implemented mandatory security measures, and revised their operational protocols. Despite recovery efforts, persistent reputational damage remains, and customer trust is still rebuilding.